There are a great deal of concerns about Texas's new anti-abortion law, including that there are no exemptions for rape or incest. Governor Abbott was asked about that, why there were not exemptions for that, and this is what he had to say.
Governor, regarding the heartbeat film, why force a rape or incest victim to carry a pregnancy to term?
It doesn't require that at all because obviously it provides at least 6 weeks for a person to be able to get an abortion. And so for one, it doesn't provide that. That said, however, let's make something very clear. Rape is a crime, and Texas will work tirelessly to make sure that we eliminate all rapists from the streets of Texas by aggressively going out and arresting them and prosecuting them and getting them off the streets.
Okay. So there were 2 parts to that. I understand the question might have been hard to hear. It was, why is there only the 6-week thing with no exemption or whatever? So let's talk about both parts. The first is well, no, like, you got 6 weeks, so don't even worry about it. Now, JR, we know, and I'm sure he knows, that that's not actually how it works. Planned Parenthood has said 85% to 90% of Texans who obtain abortions are at least 6 weeks into pregnancy. So for nearly every one of them, they're not going to fit into those 6 weeks. That sort of statistic is not a coincidence. They didn't come up with 6 weeks for nothing, randomly. They didn't throw darts or something. And so that window, the 6-week window, only provides a woman with a best case scenario, someone obsessively tracking a regular menstrual cycle of 28 days that leaves about 2 weeks after her first missed period to have an abortion. In other words, at 6 weeks and often well beyond that point, most women have no idea they're pregnant. So if everything is perfect and you're perfectly tracking and you don't miss a day and you're not distracted by anything and all of that, and you can get an instantaneous appointment, then maybe, and maybe not, especially if you have no reason, this is one of those fact checks or something like that feels most frustrating because, of course, we're pointing it out to people that don't care. They know and don't care. Greg Abbott does not care. But anyway, you have anything else to say about the timeline you laid out there?
As far as the timeline, because there's definitely something about the rapists on the streets that I know you're going to get to. But so the timeline, you listen to every word politicians say and why they may say it, or maybe it was just a simple mistake. He didn't say you've got 6 weeks maximum. He goes, you've got at least 6 weeks. Why did he say at least? That means that's on the low end. That means minimum. You have at least 6 weeks. At most, what do you have, Greg? That should be the very next question. That should be the next question from anyone that's sitting in that room. I haven't, full disclosure, I haven't read every word of the legislation that they were passing on this, or his orders, or what he wants to do with women's rights in his state. But what is the maximum in, Greg? Did you say at least 6 weeks for a reason, or did you say at least 6 weeks just to try and quell people's concerns about what you're doing here? What's on the maximum side? At least 6 weeks, at most, how many? I'm just curious. Yeah. Or maybe you don't have any of those thoughts on that. You're just trying to say something to get through this press conference before you then say something that's incredibly ignorant and stupid. And then that's when your supporters start applauding behind you to make it sound like you just said something that means anything.
Yeah, well, and then that's why he turned to the rape thing. Because he wanted an applause line or whatever. He's like, I have to briefly pretend. So the question is, hey, sounds like a lot of women are going to be really affected by this. Like, they might suffer, be forced to bear a child that was the result of them being raped by their uncle or something. So, what do you think about that? Can you potentially fix that problem? And he's like, dude, do you know who I am? Do you know, what our whole thing is? We don't give a damn about that. Yeah, we know. We don't care. We don't think that women are equal to the 95% of men that we have back here, and we're interested in what they think. And right-wingers get really fired up about this stuff. I don't personally care, but so we're going to give them what they want. That's all it is. And that's why he goes into the rape thing. So he can raise the pitch of his voice and pretend that he's actually saying something. So they're going to eliminate rape. Someone really should have thought of that before, though. I'm glad that he's getting around to it. But anyway, there are some issues with it, which we'll get into. But before we give our commentary, I want to go into a video by Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, who responded to Abbott's comments.
This idea that we're going to quote unquote end rape when the same type of, frankly, rape culture and the same type of misogynistic culture that informed this abortion law to begin with is also, those beliefs are held by the governor himself and this Texas state legislature. Frankly, there are many people in power, as we know from the Me Too movement, that commit sexual assault, that help their friends cover up these crimes. And some of them even serve in the same state legislatures that are voting on these just these anti-choice bills. It's awful. And he speaks from such a place of deep ignorance and it's not just ignorance, it's ignorance that is hurting people across this country.
Yeah, it is ignorance, sure. We cannot, discount how stupid someone like Governor Abbott is. But that said, he doesn't care. Like you could present him with, a thesis with all this information, supplemental information, citations, all that. He doesn't care. Like it's not, again, politics. When you're a child, you think, oh, wait, these people disagree about this. Well, they should just sit down and learn the facts and all that. That's not what anything is actually about, but she is right. By the way, she went on a tweet. I just want to give her full commentary. She says, and we don't have this as a graphic to the director, sexual assault is an abuse of power that attempts to seize sexual control over another person's body. Anti-choice laws are also an abuse of power that attempts to seize sexual control over people's bodies en masse. And that's one way rape culture informs anti-choice legislation. It's not a coincidence that Texas is where GOP are testing new ways to retake sexual control via legislation. Texas had anti-sodomy laws in place until 2003 that made non-PIV sex illegal until the Supreme Court overturned it on the basis of Roe v. Wade's right to privacy. And so, yeah, like we're gonna eliminate rape. Like that, for a very dumb person, sounds good. Yeah, it's a crime. We should eliminate it. The issue with it is that by the time the person is a rapist, they've committed the rape. So you want the woman to be forced to give birth to any child that comes as a result of that. But maybe you'll lock him up eventually, JR.
Yeah, there's a really easy question to ask once he says those types of statements. And it doesn't have to be a gotcha question or getting to him. If you're concerned about eliminating rape and taking them off the streets, the very next question for anyone, even if it's a full-on ardent Governor Abbott supporter, is, oh, great idea, Governor. How?
Mm-hmm.
How? Okay, how do we eliminate rape? What's your plan? Because you have an executive orders you put in place for things that you want with the anti-mask mandates and make sure people don't have any kind of protections against COVID. And now you're going to go hard on the streets and make sure that rape is eliminated. Man, how? See what he has to say, because there's no answer for that. How do you do that? So do you increase your police force, many of which were probably already infected with COVID? So do you increase your police force to go out there and then say, hey, Ted, are you a rapist? And Ted goes, yeah. You go, okay, we got to arrest him, get him off the streets. How do you eliminate rapists off the streets? How do you eliminate rapists that are in their homes doing it? How do you eliminate rapists that are on dates doing it? How do you eliminate rapists? Because apparently we just watched Law and Order or some kind of SVU story on TV, and rapists only exist when they run up behind a woman in a dark alley somewhere, because that's how it happens. We live in this cartoonish world in America where we think everything happens based off of, ironically, what's portrayed in Hollywood studios.
Yep.
As much as they hate the Hollywood types, everything that they think about guns and defending yourselves and rapists and criminals and bank robbers, all that is based off of a television show or a movie that they saw, or even their vigilanteism that they want to do when they go off and become Rambo and want to take over things. That's a movie, bro. Sylvester Stallone is an actor. He probably doesn't like you because he's one of those Hollywood elites.
I can't speak to that specifically, but you're 100% right. It is a Hollywood version of what rape is and all that rape is, and we can try to explain that to people, but this is not a new thing that we're trying to get through to them. Greg Abbott is at least as stupid as any college Republican was 20 years ago in college. That's it. They're stupid. They don't care. They're not interested in understanding. Well, for instance, the National Institute of Justice estimated in 2008 that in up to 90% of sexual assaults reported by college women, the women knew the perpetrator.
Yep.
That's data from 2008.
100%.
So maybe at some point in 13 years, you can become aware of that. Can I say, before we move on to the final point, and it's, how this might be affecting the views of Abbott. And we should also mention, by the way, that he's talking about ending rape. Dude's been in state government for years and years and years and years, as governor, as AG. How many thousands of untested rape kits are there in Texas? I don't know. I looked at a lot of different sources. At least 6,000, maybe many times that. They'll get around to it at some point.
Yeah.
On their path to eliminating rape. By the way, it's the 15th most dangerous state for rape and sexual assault in the U.S. So you maybe get around to it at some point, doing something about it. But the reason this story, for me, JR at least, and the other times we've talked about this, feels so, I think the metaphor I made in one of like our production meetings was like boxing with Jell-O, was in some cases, we know that the population leans values-wise in a left direction, but don't necessarily yet support the right policies to solve a problem that we might be discussing. We need to push them on things like the Green New Deal, or maybe Medicare for all, or something like that, or that sort of thing. But in this case, nobody is on Abbott's side. Certainly, a small minority are. Even in Texas, we've already done the convincing, and more importantly, decades and decades and decades of activists and journalists and all of that have already convinced everyone. Like, there's no majority in the country that thinks, yeah, no, there should be a bounty system that locks up anyone who helps a woman exercise rights she's had since before she was born. We already did this. We already won on this. And yet we're losing on this.
Yeah. Because
that's what feels so disarming about this. And we could win again. The Democrats could do something. They, at least on paper, agree with us, but won't do what's necessary to actually give women the rights they're supposed to have. That's what feels so weird about this whole thing.
There's a different approach from both of the parties when it comes to things like this. Republicans will represent 30% of the country in their views 100% of the time and do radical things to make sure, because they're representing the minority of people that actually don't have much of a leg to stand on if there's actual argument with facts and policy base behind it. That's why they have to do things like executive orders and bypassing things and then stacking Supreme Courts to make sure that they allow this to happen when the majority of the country doesn't want any of these things. Now, the Democratic Party will have the support of like 70% of the country, but will support them 30% of the time. It's a reverse in the way that maybe even that much. They'll give enough lip service to it, which will provide that 30% of their support, but they won't actually do anything about it because they're afraid of the people that are hardcore and absolutely want to do anything they can to make sure they represent the most radical people in the country. While we call the majority of the people radical, everything is upside down, and the people that are involved in it, we're talking about both sides, politicians that are Democratic and Republican, will play their game on their part of it. Just because maybe there's fear, maybe there's money being involved. It could be a mix of all of it. But what we definitely have is people who don't really care about the constituents that have elected them into office. That's why you also today, Texas passing their anti-voting bill, because they still need to be represented strictly by the minority of people. If you let the majority of people vote, then you have to represent them. They got to eliminate that.
Speaking of Hollywood, like, we grow up being told, oh, when great challenges come, you'll have great heroes defending you. Like, I watched like the Marvel movies. Like, no, we got a bunch of Hawkeyes, man, at best. That's all we got. There's no Iron Man. There's no Captain America, not with any power or anything.
What does Greg Abbott know about a woman's pregnancy cycle or her the fertility cycle? And what does he know about it? What does he know about how much 6 weeks works? What does he know about how each woman is different? What does he know about how stress is involved in it? What if a woman just got raped and then she's thinking about, oh, let me go ahead and check my cycle. Oh man, it's been 14 years. So do you think that way when something like that would happen to you, or are you so detached from who someone is as a human being because they're just a host? You're so detached from who they actually are as human beings and how women's cycles actually work that you don't care. You just put this blanket time frame on something. Hey, if somebody in Texas says, hey, I'm sick of all these guns. That 6-hour M80 F90 gun that has the semi-automatic pump rifle action, and people who know guns go, you dummy. You don't know anything about guns. You have no leg to stand on when you talk about this issue. Yeah. Oh, really? So how about Greg Abbott? Does he have a leg to stand on when talking about this issue? How many times has he been pregnant? How many times has he been 6 weeks pregnant? How many times has he been raped and been stressed with the thought process of, hey, what do I do about this? Was he 14 years old when some uncle raped him in the back room of a party at his family's house and his mother doesn't believe him? Did that happen to him? How much of a leg does he have to stand on when it comes to this type of issue? None, but we're listening to him.
Yeah, 100%. Like Greg Abbott, please explain morally why electrical activity being detected in heart cells in a fetus means that women shouldn't have rights. Explain the moral distinction that is made when that electrical activity is first detected. He'll have nothing. But they will tell you, you don't get to be mad that someone bought a gun and shot a bunch of people unless you can explain how tactical flashlights attached to that particular model. Like, so, almost swore. It's stupid. I'll say that. It's a stupid country we live in. Anyway.
Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.